Most people live only half a life. They show the parts that win approval and hide the parts that make them nervous. They smile, they play the role, they polish the mask, but under the mask, the shadow waits, and the more you deny it, the more power it gains. You see it when anger bursts out in small moments, or when you find yourself jealous of someone else's success. You see it in the people who irritate you most because they are reflecting something you can't admit in yourself. The shadow is always whispering, "Look here, this is you, too." But instead of listening, we run. We try to be good, pure, perfect. We imagine the goal of life is to become all light. But light without shadow does not exist. They are two sides of the same coin. And so long as you try to cut yourself in half, you will always feel incomplete. The shadow is not here to ruin you. It is here to balance you, to show you what you have left behind. If you face it honestly, you'll find something surprising. The shadow is not only your darkness, it is also your hidden strength. Think of anger. Most people think it's bad, but anger, when seen clearly, shows what you deeply care about. It is passion misdirected. Or think of envy. It feels ugly, but it tells you what you secretly long for, the dream you told yourself you could never have. Even fear has a message. It shows where your edge is, the place you are meant to grow. These feelings, if ignored, will control you, but if understood, they guide you. Your purpose is not separate from them. It grows out of them. The wound is where the gift begins. This is why so many great teachers, artists, and healers find their calling in their struggles. The poet turns heartbreak into words. The healer turns pain into compassion. The leader turns failure into wisdom. Their light was born in their shadow, and so is yours. The parts of yourself you have hidden may be the very soil where your true life waits to grow. To face the shadow is not to destroy it. It is to accept it, to listen to it, and to weave it into your wholeness. For only then can you discover the life you are meant to live. You may wonder, how do I actually face this shadow? Most people imagine it as wrestling with some inner demon. But it is not about fighting. It is about noticing. The next time you feel jealous, instead of saying, "This is bad, I shouldn't feel it," pause and ask, what does this reveal about me? What is this feeling trying to tell me? In this way, you begin to treat your shadow not as an enemy, but as a messenger. And the moment you do this, the shadow begins to lose its grip over you. Remember, what you resist persists. What you run from, you carry. But what you accept begins to transform. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the stronger it fights to rise. That is what happens with the shadow. You try to bury it, but it comes back with greater force. Yet if you simply let it float, it finds its balance on the surface. The same is true of your hidden feelings. When you allow them, you no longer waste your energy suppressing them. You free that energy for living, for creating, for loving, and here is the deeper secret. Your purpose is not something handed down from the sky. It is something that emerges when you live as a whole being. If you only live from your good side, your polite side, you are not whole. You are only half alive. But when you allow the dark with the light, when you say yes to the full spectrum of who you are, then your purpose begins to take shape. It comes not from effort or searching, but from alignment. The shadow, once faced, shows you what truly matters to you. You see, the shadow is honest, brutally honest. It does not care about appearances, about manners, about what people think. It shows you your raw edges, and within those edges lies truth. For example, a person who hides their anger may discover once they face it, that they are meant to speak up for others, to fight for justice. A person who hides their envy may discover that it points to a passion they abandoned long ago. Even fear, when embraced, becomes courage in disguise. Your purpose lives in the places you least want to look. So ask yourself, gently, what part of me have I been hiding? What trait do I judge harshly in myself or in others? What dream have I pushed away because it seemed too much, too risky? Write these down, sit with them, not to condemn them, not to indulge them, but simply to acknowledge them. You will see that each shadow carries a thread, and if you follow the thread, it leads to a deeper understanding of who you are and what you are here to do. Facing the shadow is frightening, yes, but it is also liberating. Now let us consider how this affects your relationships. Have you noticed how the same conflicts appear again and again with different people? Perhaps you always clash with authority, or maybe you always find yourself drawn to the same kind of partner. These are not accidents, they are the shadow at work. Relationships act as mirrors, reflecting back the parts of yourself you have yet to face. The person who irritates you most is showing you something about yourself. Instead of only blaming them, ask, what is this revealing about me? In this way, every conflict becomes an opportunity. And when you begin to see your shadow in others, compassion grows. You realize that they, too, are struggling with hidden fears and desires. They, too, are projecting what they cannot face. And suddenly, instead of resenting, you begin to understand. This does not mean excusing harm, but it does mean recognizing our shared humanity. Everyone carries a shadow, and when you embrace your own, you no longer need to pretend you are above others. You meet them as equals. And in that meeting, true connection becomes possible. This is why wholeness is far more powerful than perfection. Perfection is brittle, fragile. It breaks the moment life shows its rough edges. Wholeness, on the other hand, is strong because it already includes the rough edges. When you embrace your shadow, you are no longer afraid of being exposed. You have nothing to hide, and so you live with more freedom, more authenticity. And from this authenticity, purpose shines naturally. You are not trying to be something. You are simply being yourself fully. And that is where meaning is found. Think of the artist who finally paints with all the colors, not just the safe ones. Their work gains depth. Think of the musician who allows sorrow as well as joy into their songs. The music becomes powerful. Think of the teacher who shares their own struggles as well as their wisdom. Their words carry weight. The same is true for you. When you embrace your shadow, your life gains depth. You are no longer flat, one-dimensional. You are real. And in being real, you discover what only you can bring to the world. But some will ask, isn't it dangerous to embrace the shadow? What if it leads me astray? The answer is this: ignoring it is far more dangerous. When you repress the shadow, it controls you unconsciously. That is when it causes real harm. But when you face it consciously, with awareness, it becomes energy you can use. It becomes part of your wholeness. To be whole is not to indulge every impulse, but to recognize them, to understand them, and to guide them wisely. The shadow, once integrated, becomes your ally. It gives you power without corruption. And here is where the deepest purpose begins to reveal itself. Your wounds are not mistakes. They are the raw material of your gift. The very thing you thought disqualified you may be the thing that qualifies you most. A person who has felt loneliness may be called to create community. A person who has known fear may be called to bring courage to others. A person who has faced failure may be called to teach resilience. The shadow holds not only your pain, but also the seed of your contribution. Your purpose is born from both, so do not be surprised if your path feels like a descent, before it feels like a rise. The hero must enter the cave before they find the treasure. You too must face the shadow before you discover your calling. And when you do, you realize that purpose was never about escaping the dark. It was about bringing the dark into the light. This is the dance of life. Night and day, joy and sorrow, light and shadow. To embrace both is to awaken. To awaken is to live with depth. And in depth, purpose arises naturally. Look at the areas where you feel the strongest emotion. Look at your anger, your envy, your shame. These are not random. They are signals. They are the places where your shadow is knocking, saying, pay attention. If you follow those signals, you will discover more about yourself than you ever could through polite self-improvement. For the shadow shows you where you are hiding. And where you are hiding is where your life's purpose is waiting. What you run from is often what you are here to give. And this is not only personal, it is collective. For when you face your shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop adding your hidden fear to the world's chaos. Instead, you bring clarity. You bring compassion. Imagine a world where people no longer fought their shadows through each other, but faced them within themselves. Wars would lessen. Hatred would soften. Understanding would deepen. This is why facing your shadow is not selfish. It is service. The more whole you become, the more whole the world becomes. So do not think of this as self-improvement. Think of it as self-integration. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. And wholeness requires every part of you, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the strengths and the flaws. When you allow it all, you discover a freedom unlike anything else. You no longer have to prove yourself, hide yourself, or run from yourself. You can simply live. And in that living, you naturally express your purpose. It flows out of you because it is you. The shadow, then, is not a burden. It is a gift. It is the part of you that demands honesty. And honesty is the root of authenticity. Authenticity is the root of purpose. Think of it this way. If you never faced your shadow, you would live someone else's life, chasing borrowed dreams, pleasing the crowd. But when you face it, you reclaim your true path. And that path, though it may not look grand in the world's eyes, is the only one that will ever satisfy you. Because it is yours, entirely yours. So I ask you, what are you running from? What do you criticize most in others? What do you bury in yourself? These are not signs of your failure. They are the doorway to your future. If you turn and walk through them, you will find energy you did not know you had. You will find gifts you had long forgotten. You will find the very purpose you thought you were missing. Life has hidden it in the place you least wanted to look. That is the divine joke. That is the paradox. And when you finally embrace your shadow, you will notice something extraordinary. You stop being divided. You feel a sense of peace you could never find by pretending. You feel a strength that comes from knowing, I am all of this, and I am enough. From the earliest days of childhood, we are haunted by a question. It might begin as a whisper, or a moment of silence after a funeral, or a sudden awareness as you lie awake in bed. What happens when I die? It is perhaps the most ancient and universal of all human questions. Every civilization has told stories about it. Every religion has sought to answer it. And every individual, in quiet moments, has wondered about the end of their own life. We fear it, we resist it, we deny it. We invent heavens and hells, reincarnations and rebirths, all in an attempt to soften the blow of the unknown. Yet no story, no belief can fully erase the raw fact that one day the body will cease, the breath will stop, and all that you think of as you will dissolve. And so the question lingers, what then? For most people, death is the ultimate problem. It is the great wall at the end of the road, the one event you cannot bargain with, escape from, or outsmart. You can postpone it, distract yourself from it, but you cannot avoid it. And this is why so much of life becomes a struggle to avoid thinking about it. We fill our days with noise, with plans, with ambitions, with entertainment, anything to keep us from remembering that each tick of the clock is carrying us closer to that final moment. But in avoiding the thought of death, we give it even more power. Like a shadow that grows darker the more you try to ignore it, death becomes the hidden terror that shapes everything from behind the scenes. Why do people crave legacy? Because they fear being forgotten. Why do they cling to possessions? Because they fear losing themselves. Why do they desperately seek meaning? Because they fear that without it, death will reveal life to have been pointless. Now, here is the problem at the heart of it. We imagine death as an experience that will happen to us. We think of it as the moment we will face darkness, or nothingness, or some judgment. But this imagination contains a flaw. Ask yourself, if you are not conscious, who is there to experience death at all? This is the paradox. We fear nothingness, but nothingness is not something you can ever know. For when you are gone, there is no you left to notice the absence. Just as before you were born, there was no awareness of time passing, no awareness of missing out. Think back, if you can, to before your birth. Where were you in the year 1800, in the year 1500? What was it like? You cannot answer because there was no you to experience it. And in the same way, when the body ceases, there will be no you to miss life, no you to fear death. But still, we resist this truth. The ego, that fragile sense of I, cannot imagine its own end. It clings desperately, like a hand grasping at water, trying to hold itself together. It tells stories of eternal continuation, some of them comforting, some of them terrifying, but all of them built on the same fear, the fear of no longer being. This is why, across the world, people cling to heaven, hell, reincarnation, ghosts, spirits, any image that suggests the story doesn't simply end. Because to the mind, an ending feels like annihilation. But notice, endings are everywhere, and yet they are never absolute. The day ends and night begins. A wave ends, but the sea continues. A note ends, but the music flows on. What if death is not annihilation, but transformation? Not the end of existence, but the end of a particular form of it? Yet here we are, living as though life were a fragile possession that must be clutched tightly, defended at all costs, kept safe from the inevitable. And because of this, many people never truly live. They are so busy trying not to die that they forget to be alive. This is the irony of death. By fearing it, you let it rob you of life long before it arrives. Consider how much of our daily striving is, at its root, an attempt to deny death. We build monuments, hoard wealth, chase fame, create legacies, all to leave a mark that will outlast us. Yet history shows us clearly. Kingdoms crumble, names are forgotten, monuments turn to dust, even the stars themselves burn out. So if the point of life is to secure immortality, the game is lost from the beginning. This is the first problem. We want what cannot be had. We want permanence in a universe that is always changing. We want security in a life that is fundamentally uncertain. We want eternal survival in a cosmos where everything is born, blossoms, and dissolves. And so death terrifies us, not because of what it is, but because of what it reveals, that everything we cling to is temporary, that the ego's demand for permanence is an impossible dream. But what if the problem lies not in death, but in the way we think about it? Because you see, death is not an event that happens in the future. It is happening right now. Cells are dying in your body every moment. Thoughts arise and pass away. Moments appear and vanish into memory. Every breath is a little death, the end of one cycle, the beginning of another. And yet, you are still here. So perhaps death is not the enemy at all, but the very condition of life. Without endings, there would be no beginnings. Without death, there would be no life. But the mind resists this because it wants to think of life as a possession. My life, my body, my future. And when the idea of death comes, it feels like theft, as if life were being taken away from me. Yet what if life was never yours to begin with? What if life is not a possession, but a process? Not a thing you own, but a dance you participate in. When you see it this way, death ceases to be the thief of life and becomes its partner. The two are inseparable, like the front and back of a coin. Still, the ego insists, but what will become of me? What will happen to the story I have lived, the identity I have built, the memories I have gathered? And the answer is simple. They will dissolve, just as dreams dissolve when you wake, just as each day dissolves into the next. The story will end, but you are not merely the story. You are the awareness in which the story unfolded. And awareness is not something you can lose, because it is not a thing to begin with. This is perhaps the hardest truth to face, because it means the ego's demands will never be satisfied. There is no guarantee of permanence. There is no way to hold on to life forever. And yet, there is also liberation in this. For once you stop demanding permanence, you are free to truly live. Imagine a symphony. If you demanded that it never end, if you tried to hold on to the last note forever, you would destroy the music. The beauty of the symphony is in its unfolding, its rise and fall, its movement and conclusion. Life is like that. It is music. It is a dance. And death is not the enemy of the music, but the silence that makes it possible. This is the problem as most people see it. Death as the end, death as the enemy, death as the great void to be avoided. And in resisting it, they suffer twice, once in fear and once in the event itself. But what if we could see it differently? What if death is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, even embraced? That is the possibility we will turn to in the next chapter. If the first chapter was about our fear of death, then let us now look more deeply at its mystery. Because when you stop running from death, you discover it is not an end to life, but the very thing that makes life possible. Consider the seasons. Spring blossoms, summer flourishes, autumn fades, winter rests. Each season gives way to the next. If you tried to cling to summer forever, you would kill the cycle. Without autumn and winter, there could be no renewal of spring. Death is like this. It is not a mistake in the design of life, it is the design. Without it, there would be no change, no growth, no renewal. Life would stagnate, frozen and lifeless. So to see death as the enemy is to miss the larger dance in which it plays an essential role. But what, you may ask, happens to you when you die? Where does your awareness go? This question itself is already mistaken, because it assumes awareness is something you possess, like a coin that can be taken away or returned. But awareness is not in you. You are in it. Think of a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool has a shape, a boundary, an identity. You can point to it and say, "There it island." But if you look closely, you see it is nothing but the river itself, swirling in a particular form. The water flows in, spins, flows out, and the whirlpool vanishes. Yet the river remains. So it is with you. Your body, your mind, your identity, these are the whirlpool. They have a shape, a pattern, a story, but they are made entirely of life itself, flowing in and out. When the whirlpool dissolves, nothing is lost, because the river continues. Death, then, is not annihilation. It is transformation. It is the dissolving of one pattern into the greater flow. But because we cling to the whirlpool, because we think of ourselves as this separate identity, we fear its end. We forget that what we really are is the river, and the river does not die. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize letting go of the ego, because the ego is precisely the illusion that you are separate, that you are a thing, that you are an object moving through time. Death shatters this illusion. But if you awaken before death, if you realize now that you are not the whirlpool but the river itself, then death loses its sting. You see it for what it is, a change of form, not a destruction of being. Alan Watts often used the metaphor of sleep. Every night you go to sleep, and your sense of self dissolves. Dreams arise and vanish. Hours pass in pure nothingness. And yet you do not fear this. You may even enjoy it. Why, then, do we fear the great sleep of death? Perhaps because we imagine it will last forever. But if you think carefully, forever is not an experience. It is not something you can know. Just as before you were born, you were not sitting in darkness waiting to arrive. You simply were not there. And it was not frightening, because there was no you to be afraid. Death is like this. It is not a darkness into which you will fall. It is the falling away of the one who imagines themselves falling. Now, this realization is not meant to be grim. On the contrary, it is profoundly liberating, because once you see that you are not a fragile object trying to cling to life, but life itself in motion, you can stop worrying about the end. You can begin to live fully, here and now. Think of how differently you would live if you no longer feared death. You would not postpone joy for tomorrow. You would not waste time clinging to grudges or chasing trivial ambitions. You would see each moment as precious, not because it will last forever, but because it will not. Just as a flower is beautiful not despite its brief bloom, but because of it, so life is beautiful because it is fleeting. Death, then, is not the opposite of life. It is the opposite of birth. Life is the dance between them, the movement of appearing and disappearing, arising and dissolving. And when you embrace this, you begin to see that death is not something that happens once at the end, but something woven into every moment. Every breath, every heartbeat, every passing thought, all are little deaths. And yet, here you are, alive in the midst of them. So, the great death is simply the culmination of what has always been happening, the continual transformation of life. There is another way to see this. Consider music again. A song is made of notes and silences. Without the silence between the notes, the music would be noise. Without the ending of each note, there would be no melody. Death is the silence that makes the song of life possible. It is not a flaw in the song, it is the structure of the song itself. And so, when the final note comes, it is not a tragedy, it is the completion of the music. This way of seeing transforms how we relate to death. Instead of resisting it, we can honor it. Instead of fearing it, we can embrace it. And when we do, life itself becomes richer. We no longer cling to each moment in desperation, but receive it as a gift. We no longer waste our days in fear of the end, but live them fully, knowing that their impermanence is what makes them precious. But here is the deepest insight. You are not only the one who lives and dies, you are life itself, playing at being a person, dancing as a form, appearing for a time and dissolving again. When you die, it is not that life ends, it is that life stops playing this particular role and moves on to another. The actor leaves the stage, but the play continues. And in this sense, death is not the end of you, because the you thought you were was never the whole story. You are the stage itself, the light in which the play unfolds. So, what happens when you die? From the perspective of the ego, the answer is simple. The story ends, the character dissolves, the memories fade. But from the perspective of life itself, nothing is lost. The river flows on. The music continues. And once you see this, death is no longer something to be feared, but something to be respected, even welcomed, as part of the great mystery of existence. I always say, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. In the same way, trying to imagine your own death is like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. It cannot be done, and this impossibility is the key, because it means that what you fear, the experience of nothingness, will never be experienced at all. Instead, life will simply return to the vastness from which it came, as it always has, as it always will. So perhaps the wisest response to the question of death is not an answer, but a shift of perspective, to stop asking what will happen to me and instead see that there is no separate me to be lost. Life is happening, life is dancing, and death is part of the rhythm. When you know this, you stop clinging, you stop resisting. You begin to live as though each moment were both the first and the last, which, in truth, it island. So what happens when you die? You return to what you have always been, the vast, timeless awareness in which all things appear and disappear. And when you realize this now, while you are still alive, death is no longer the great enemy. It is simply the other face of life.
You know, there's something rather amusing about the way we've been taught to talk to God. We approach it as if we're sending a telegram to some distant cosmic emperor who sits on a throne billions of miles away, checking his clipboard to see if we've been good enough to deserve his attention. We kneel down, close our eyes very tightly, fold our hands just so, and then we begin our performance. Dear God, we say, as if we're writing a letter to someone we've never met. I hope you're having a nice day up there. Now, about that thing I wanted... But what if I told you that the whole setup is backwards? What if talking to God has nothing whatever to do with talking to someone else at all? Let me ask you something. When you talk to yourself, do you use words? I don't mean when you're muttering about the grocery list or rehearsing what you're going to say to your boss. I mean in those quiet moments when you're really listening to yourself, when you're trying to figure out what you actually feel about something, what you truly want. In those moments, there's a kind of knowing that happens before words, isn't there? It's more like a recognition, a sensing, a direct awareness of what's going on inside you. Now, here's the curious thing. What we call God, what we might also call the universe, the ground of being, the eternal now, this isn't some separate entity sitting outside of you, checking off items on a list. You see, you are an expression of this whole universe. You're not in the universe like a marble in a box. You are something the universe is doing right here, right now, in the same way that a wave is something the ocean is doing. So when you talk to God, you're not really talking to someone else. You're becoming aware of what you already are. You're tuning in to the fact that this thing you call me is actually the whole cosmos experiencing itself from this particular point of view. Think about it this way. The wave rises up out of the ocean and looks around and says, my goodness, I'm separate from all this water. But of course, that's nonsense. The wave is water. It's made of water. It moves with the water. When it crashes on the shore, it doesn't die. It simply returns to what it always was, the ocean. We are like that wave. We rise up out of this mysterious source, this ground of all being, and we think we're separate from it. We think we have to shout across some vast distance to get its attention. But you can't be separate from it, because you are it. You are the universe looking at itself through your eyes right now. So what does it mean to talk to God? It means to stop, to be quiet, to listen. You see, we've got the whole thing backwards. We think prayer is about speaking, about making our requests known. about explaining our situation to some divine bookkeeper who might not have noticed what's going on in our lives. But the real art is in the listening, not the speaking. When Jesus went off by himself to pray, he wasn't reciting memorized formulas. He was becoming quiet enough to hear. He was letting go of the noise in his head, all the chatter, all the planning and worrying and rehearsing. He was settling into a deeper silence where something else could speak. And what speaks in that silence? Well, that's the whole mystery, isn't it? You might call it intuition, or guidance, or the voice of God. But what it really is reality itself making itself known to you. It's life showing you what wants to happen next. Let me tell you what happens when most people pray. They come with an agenda. They've already decided what should happen. They've figured out exactly how God should fix their problem, exactly what solution would be best. And then they dress it all up in humble language. If it be thy will, Lord, please do exactly what I've already decided should happen. But this is rather like going to a doctor and saying, I've diagnosed my own condition and prescribed my own treatment. Now please give me what I've decided I need. The doctor might smile and say, perhaps we should examine you first, don't you think? The correct way to talk to God is to come empty. To come not knowing. To come without your list of demands and requirements. To come as pure listening, pure receptivity, pure openness to what is. This is not passivity. This is not. It's something much more alive than that. It's like swimming in a river. If you try to control the water, if you try to force it to flow in a different direction, you'll exhaust yourself and probably drown. But if you relax into the current, if you feel which way it's moving and flow with it, then you discover you can navigate with incredible grace and power. When you sit quietly and stop all your internal chattering, something remarkable happens. At first, you notice all the noise, all the thoughts bouncing around like popcorn in a hot pan, all the worries, the plans, the memories, the fantasies. And your first instinct will be to try to stop them, to push them away, to make your mind blank and pure. But you see, this too is just more doing. It's more controlling. It's more of you trying to force reality to match your idea of how it should be. Instead, simply watch. Watch the thoughts come and go like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to believe them or act on them or push them away. Just watch. And in the watching, something begins to happen. The thoughts begin to slow down. The chatter begins to quiet. And in that quietness, you begin to sense something else. A presence, an awareness, a sense of being held by something much larger than yourself. This is what Jesus meant when he said the kingdom of heaven is within you. He wasn't talking about some future reward or some place you go when you die. He was talking about this direct awareness of your unity with all that is. This recognition that you are not separate from the source of all life. Now I know what you're thinking. But what about my problems? What about the things I need help with? Are you telling me I should just sit quietly and do nothing while my life falls apart? Not at all. But here's what I am saying. The help you need doesn't come from some external deity who might or might not decide to intervene. It comes from this deeper wisdom that emerges when you get your anxious, controlling little ego out of the way. When you're all wound up in worry, when you're frantically trying to figure everything out, when you're desperately praying for God to change your circumstances, you're like a radio that's jammed with static. The signal is there, but you can't hear it because you're making too much noise. But when you become quiet, when you let go of your agenda, when you stop trying to control the outcome, something amazing happens. Solutions appear that you couldn't have thought of. Opportunities open up that you didn't know existed. You find yourself saying and doing exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, not because you planned it, but because you got out of your own way and let life flow through you. This is what it means to pray without ceasing, as Paul put it. It doesn't mean walking around all day reciting prayers. It means living in this state of open awareness, this constant listening, this ongoing recognition of your connection to the source of all being. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're worried about money. The usual way of praying about this is to ask God to give you money, to make your circumstances better, to solve your financial problems. But notice what this does. It keeps you focused on the problem. It reinforces the belief that you don't have enough. It makes you feel powerless and dependent on some external force to rescue you. But suppose instead you sit quietly and simply become aware of your breathing. You notice the air moving in and out. You notice that you didn't have to learn how to breathe. Your body just knows. It's been breathing you since the moment you were born, and it will continue breathing you until the moment you die, without any effort or worry on your part. And then you expand that awareness. You notice that your heart is beating, your food is digesting, your cells are doing their incredible dance of life. All of this is happening without any conscious control from you. The intelligence that runs your body is vastly greater than your conscious mind. And this intelligence, this organizing principle, this creative force, it's the same intelligence that spins the galaxies and grows the trees and brings the spring after winter. It's all one thing. And you are not separate from it. You are one of its expressions. When you really feel this, when you sense your connection to this vast creative intelligence, something shifts. You stop feeling like a beggar asking for scraps. You start feeling like what you are, an integral part of this whole magnificent process. And from that place, from that sense of connection and trust, you begin to act differently. You make different choices. You see opportunities you missed before. You find resources you didn't know you had. The money problem might or might not resolve itself immediately, but your relationship to it changes. You stop being paralyzed by fear. You stop making desperate decisions. You start flowing with life instead of fighting against it. This is what Jesus demonstrated over and over again. He didn't stand apart from the Father, begging and pleading. He said, I and the Father are one. He lived from that place of unity. And from that place, the so-called miracles happen naturally, not as violations of natural law, but as expressions of a deeper understanding of how things actually work. Now you might say, but what about gratitude? Shouldn't we thank God for what we have? Of course. But again, we've misunderstood what gratitude really is. It's not about keeping God happy, like a child thanking a parent so they'll get dessert. Real gratitude is simply the recognition of the gift that existence is. Look at this. You are alive. You can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. You can think and feel and experience this astonishing world. None of this is ordinary. None of this is something you earned or deserved. It's pure gift. It's grace. It's miracle. When you really see this, when you really feel the extraordinary nature of the most ordinary moment, a glass of water, a breath of air, the warmth of the sun, gratitude arises naturally. You don't have to manufacture it or perform it. It simply bubbles up from the recognition of how blessed you already are. And this gratitude changes everything. It shifts you from a state of lack to a state of abundance, from fear to trust, from grasping to receiving, and in that state you become a channel for even more life, even more creativity, even more blessing to flow through you. So here's the correct way to talk to God. Sit down. Close your eyes if you like, or leave them open and softly focused. Take a few deep breaths and feel your body relaxing. Notice the thoughts bouncing around in your head, but don't follow them. Just watch them come and go. And then, without words, without any formulas or scripts, simply open yourself. Be receptive. Be listening. Be aware. Notice the silence underneath all the noise. Notice the space in which all experience is happening. Notice that you are aware, and this awareness is not separate from what you're aware of. You might sense a presence. You might have insights bubble up. You might simply feel a sense of peace or connection. Or nothing much might happen at all, and that's fine too. You're not doing this to get something. You're doing it to remember what you are. And then as you go about your day, carry this awareness with you. When you're washing dishes, really wash the dishes. Feel the warm water. Notice the bubbles. Be completely present to this simple act. When you're talking to someone, really listen. Don't plan your response. Don't judge what they're saying. Just be there, fully present, fully open. This is prayer. Not the words you recite, but the quality of your presence. Not the requests you make, but the awareness you bring to each moment. When you live this way, you discover something wonderful. The distinction between sacred and ordinary dissolves. Everything becomes prayer. Making breakfast is prayer. Walking to work is prayer. Listening to a friend is prayer. Because you're no longer separate from the source. You're no longer trying to get God's attention. You're simply being what you are, a unique expression of the divine, a particular way that the universe is experiencing itself. And from this place, when you do speak words of prayer, they come from a different source. They're not demands or bargaining or performance. They're expressions of this deeper awareness. They might sound like, thank you, or help me see clearly, or simply yes. You see, the correct way to talk to God is to recognize that there's no one to talk to. There's only this eternal now, this present moment, this direct experience of being alive, and you are not separate from it. You are it. So stop trying so hard. Stop performing. Stop pretending you're someone you're not, talking to something outside yourself. Just be quiet. Just listen. Just open yourself to what is, and in that openness, you'll find that you're already being prayed through. The universe is speaking itself through you. Life is living itself as you. God, if you want to use that word, is not something you talk to. It's what you are. This is the secret that the mystics have known in every tradition. That the seeker and the sought are one. That the prayer and the prayed to are the same thing looking at itself from different angles. That prayer is not communication between separate beings, but the universe becoming conscious of itself. So the correct way to talk to God is to stop talking and start listening. To stop seeking and start being. To stop performing and start experiencing. And in that simple shift, everything changes. Not because God finally heard you and decided to answer, but because you remembered what you always were, an inseparable part of the whole.
There comes a point in every life when the applause fades, when the noise of the crowd grows distant, and you find yourself walking through a silence that feels almost foreign. At first, you might resist it. You may think that something has gone wrong, that you have fallen behind, that you've been forgotten by the world. But perhaps what has really happened is that life has drawn back its curtain so that you may see yourself as you truly are, without the distractions, without the mirrors, without the endless performance of being someone for someone else. You see, for most of our lives, we are surrounded by noise, expectations, judgments, comparisons, and we mistake this noise for meaning. We think that being noticed is the same as being alive. But there comes a moment, and it comes to everyone sooner or later, when the world stops looking at you, when you are left to look at yourself. And in that moment, you are faced with the most extraordinary invitation to discover that your worth was never dependent on an audience at all. We are taught from an early age that validation is a kind of currency, that to be loved is to be seen, and to be seen is to be successful. A child brings home a drawing and looks not at the drawing, but at the parent's face, searching for approval. A student studies not for the joy of learning, but for the grade, for the pat on the back, for the fleeting sense of being enough. And as adults, we continue this pattern without realizing it. We chase recognition, praise, applause. We mistake attention for affection and admiration for understanding. But all of this, though it feels like progress, is a subtle form of dependence. It ties your peace to the whims of others. your sense of value to the ever-shifting moods of the crowd. The tragedy is that in seeking affirmation from others, you lose connection with the quiet, steady affirmation of life itself, the simple fact that you are here, breathing, being, existing. That alone is the original validation. There is something sacred about walking through the fog when no one is beside you and no one is watching. It is in that loneliness that you begin to hear what cannot be heard in the noise of company, the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the quiet pulse of existence that has been speaking to you all along. We spend so much time trying to be understood that we forget to understand ourselves. But it is in solitude that understanding ripens. When there is no one to impress, you start to see yourself clearly. You start to notice the small things, the way your mind moves, the way your heart responds, the way life unfolds around you, even when you are not trying to control it. The silence, which at first seemed empty, begins to feel full of insight, full of presence, full of life. You see, loneliness is not the absence of others. It is the discovery of yourself in the absence of others. It is the universe saying, now, at last, you are ready to meet who you truly are. We treat solitude as a punishment, but it is the first and greatest teacher. When there is no one to depend on, you begin to depend on the stillness within. When there is no one to cheer you on, you discover that the act of moving forward is its own applause. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. The journey is the reward. Every small effort, every unseen victory, every quiet act of persistence, these are the milestones of real growth. They may not earn you applause, but they build something far greater, a quiet strength that no one can give and no one can take away. We've been taught to think of life as a competition, a ladder to climb, a race to win. But this way of thinking creates an endless hunger, a thirst that cannot be quenched. We compare ourselves to others, measure our worth by their approval, and in doing so, we make ourselves miserable. The Buddha called this craving tanha, the thirst that binds us to suffering. And the only way to end it is not by acquiring more approval, but by seeing through the illusion of needing it. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself, you begin to live freely. You realize that you were never behind, that you were never lacking. You were simply caught in the trance of comparison. Think for a moment about a flower growing in the forest. It blooms quietly, unseen by anyone, and yet it blooms all the same. It does not question whether it is worthy. It does not demand recognition. It simply fulfills its nature to blossom, to be. And in that simple act, it participates fully in the miracle of existence. The flower does not bloom for the world. It blooms because blooming is what life does through it. You, too, are such a flower. You do not need to be admired to be alive. You do not need to be seen to be real. Life itself is seeing through your eyes, breathing through your lungs, moving through your steps. The universe is aware of you because you are the universe aware of itself. But because we forget this, we go seeking mirrors. We ask others to tell us who we are, what we're worth, whether we're enough. Yet every mirror we find is distorted. People see us not as we are, but as they are. Their opinions reflect their own fears and desires more than our truth. And so, if you live for approval, you will live in distortion. You will twist yourself to fit images that were never yours, and in doing so, you will abandon your authenticity. True freedom comes when you stop needing mirrors, when you realize that you are both the reflection and the light that makes reflection possible. That is the beginning of real maturity, to become your own witness, your own source of affirmation. There is a kind of discipline that grows out of this understanding, but it is not the discipline of force. It is the discipline of love. You rise each day not because you must, but because something in you honors the unfolding of life. You take the next step not because someone is watching, but because walking itself is sacred. You work, you create, you try, you fail, and you begin again, not because the world demands it, but because that is the rhythm of being alive. To live this way is to be free from both praise and blame. It is to see that success and failure are not opposites, but phases of the same movement, like the crest and trough of a wave. When you fail, you learn. When you learn, you grow. And growth, in its own quiet way, is success. Imagine a potter shaping clay. Each time the bowl collapses, he does not despair. He simply gathers the clay again, softens it, and begins anew. The cracks and imperfections become part of the art. In Japan, they repair broken pottery with gold, a practice called kintsugi, because they understand that the object's history adds to its beauty. Likewise, every time you fall, every time you are unseen or uncelebrated, the gold of experience fills your cracks. You become more whole, not less, more luminous, not dimmer. This is how the universe makes art out of you. The great mistake is to wait for motivation, to believe that we must feel inspired before we act. But motivation is like the weather, it comes and goes without warning. Discipline, on the other hand, is like the sun. It may hide behind clouds, but it never ceases to shine. Real discipline is not about control, it is about trust. It is faith in the process of your own unfolding. Even when you cannot see progress, something within you is maturing, deepening, preparing to bloom again. The tree in winter looks lifeless, but beneath the surface, roots are growing, drawing strength from the earth. So when your life feels quiet, when nothing seems to be happening, know that something essential is taking root. The silence you fear is not the absence of life, it is the presence of everything. Sit quietly, and you'll begin to feel it. The hum of existence, the gentle awareness that watches your thoughts rise and fall like waves. That awareness is who you are. Not the thoughts, not the emotions, but the space in which they appear. Once you see this, you realize that you were never truly alone. Even in solitude, life is with you. You are with you, and that is enough. You may wonder, what about the people who left? What about the ones who didn't see me, who didn't believe in me? But perhaps they were never meant to. Perhaps their absence is part of your awakening, a clearing of the space so that you might meet yourself without distraction. When you are no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth, you begin to live from it. You begin to create from it. You begin to love from it. And that is a power no applause can give you. To be unseen is not to be forgotten. The seed buried in darkness is not neglected. It is becoming. And when the time is right, it breaks the soil, not to prove anything, but because that is its nature. So too with you. You are growing in ways that the world may not yet recognize. You are unfolding according to a rhythm far deeper than public validation. And one day, without fanfare, you will realize that you no longer need to get ahead, because you are already ahead. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are living it fully right now. So when you find yourself walking alone, do not despair. Do not rush to escape the quiet. Sit with it. Listen. The silence is speaking. It is saying, you are already home. There comes a time when you realize that being unseen has given you the greatest gift of all, space. The space to listen, to breathe, to exist without performing. Most people live their entire lives afraid of that space. They fill it with noise, with work, with chatter, with distractions. They keep the television on, the phone buzzing, the mind spinning anything to avoid being left alone with themselves. But it is only in that aloneness that something begins to awaken. Because the silence you fear is not emptiness. It is fullness so vast that your little identity trembles before it. When you stop running from it, you begin to see that everything you were looking for in the eyes of others has been looking out through your eyes all along. You see, the entire problem of loneliness is based on a misunderstanding. You think you are a fragment cut off from the rest of the world, and so you seek connection, attention, affirmation, as if these were bridges that could return you to the whole. But you were never separate in the first place. You are like a wave asking the ocean where the water went. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought arises from the same field of being that moves the stars. When you understand this, the idea that you are alone becomes as absurd as the idea of a sunbeam being separate from the sun. You were never disconnected, you simply forgot the truth of your belonging. The irony of striving is that the harder you chase connection, the further you drift from it. You cannot grasp what you already are. The more you reach for validation, the more you affirm the illusion of incompleteness. But when you relax, when you surrender, when you stop trying to prove yourself, a remarkable thing happens. Life begins to hold you again. It's as if existence was waiting for you to stop struggling so it could show you that you were never unsupported. The Taoists call this Wu Wei, effortless action. It is not laziness but harmony. It is the art of moving with life rather than against it. When you learn to live this way, even the most ordinary moments shimmer with quiet perfection. Washing dishes, walking in the rain, sitting in stillness, all become sacred because you are fully there. Most people think that freedom is something to be earned, that they must struggle for it, plan for it, fight for it. But freedom is the natural state of being once you stop pretending to be what you are not. You cannot manufacture freedom any more than you can manufacture the sky. You simply remove the clouds that hide it. Those clouds are made of fear, doubt, comparison, and the need for control. And when you stop feeding them, they dissolve on their own. Then, without effort, the vastness of who you are shines through. That vastness is not something you become, it is something you remember. Think of how a musician learns an instrument. At first, there is tension, effort, striving. Every movement feels clumsy. But over time, the musician relaxes into the rhythm. The fingers know what to do without thought. The music plays itself. That is what life is like when you stop trying to control it. You stop thinking about living and start living. You stop forcing and start flowing. The universe has been composing through you all along. It only needed you to stop interrupting the melody. To get ahead, then, is not to outpace others, but to outgrow your illusions. It is to see that progress is not measured by how many people see your work or applaud your journey, but by how deeply you inhabit your own being. The true success of a life is not in its visibility, but in its authenticity. The great tree in the forest grows tall, not because it competes with others, but because it follows its own light. It drinks deeply of the soil and rises effortlessly toward the sun. It doesn't ask the nearby trees for permission. It doesn't compare its leaves. It simply grows, and in that quiet growth, it fulfills its purpose. And what is your purpose? It is to be what you already are, to live this life as fully and as honestly as you can, to bring awareness to whatever is before you, whether that's joy or sorrow, gain or loss, company or solitude. You do not need a grand destiny, you need presence. Presence is life itself, paying attention through you. When you are present, even the smallest act becomes magnificent. Drinking water becomes communion, listening to the wind becomes prayer. Existence stops being a means to an end and becomes the end itself. Many people say they want peace, but what they really want is a peaceful version of control. They want the world to go their way so they can relax. But true peace doesn't depend on conditions. It arises when you stop resisting what is, when you stop demanding that the world reflect your preferences. You begin to see that life has always been perfect in its imperfection. You were never meant to manage existence, only to participate in it. When you let go of control, life begins to feel effortless, and in that effortlessness, you finally discover the very ease you were chasing all along. There will be days when the fog returns, when the path seems unclear, when doubt whispers that you are wasting your time. On those days, remember this: the fog is not an obstacle, it is the path itself. It teaches you to walk by feel, to trust the unseen, to listen for the quiet guidance that is always there beneath the noise. Every step through uncertainty strengthens your connection to something larger than thought. It teaches you faith, not the kind that clings to belief, but the kind that rests in knowing. You begin to trust the rhythm of your own becoming, even when you cannot see where it leads. Do not be afraid of being misunderstood. The deeper your understanding, the fewer people will understand you. This is not isolation, it is evolution. The higher the mountain, the thinner the air. You are meant to breathe that clarity, even if others cannot join you there. Do not descend for comfort. Rise for truth. And when the world seems to move past you, remember that stillness moves in its own way. The seed underground looks dormant, yet it is transforming. The caterpillar inside its cocoon appears lifeless, yet it is being remade. Trust your hidden seasons. The silence is not punishment, it is preparation. And when recognition finally comes, as it often does, you will smile because you no longer need it. Praise will feel like an echo of something you already knew. You will understand that the real reward was not being seen but learning to see, not being loved but becoming love, not being successful but being free. The applause, the achievements, the acknowledgement, all of them will seem small compared to the vastness of the peace you found within. So walk forward, even when no one walks with you, even when no one claps or calls your name. Walk because walking is your nature. Rise because rising is what waves do. Move not because the world demands it, but because life itself moves through you. You are not behind. You were never left out. You are part of a great unfolding, and your role is to let it unfold through you in its own time, in its own rhythm. And when doubt creeps in, remember this simple truth: the eyes of existence are already upon you. The universe is looking through your face, breathing through your lungs, living through your heart. You were never separate, never unseen. You have always been enough. The fog was never there to hide you. It was there to reveal you. When the mist clears, you will find that what you were searching for was not waiting at the top of some mountain, but shining quietly within you all along. Because the moment you stop waiting to be seen is the moment you begin to see. And in that seeing, life begins again. There is an old saying that the truth will set you free, but before it frees you, it makes you heavy. The truthful man, wherever you find him, seems to walk under a weight invisible to others. He may not complain, he may not cry out, but there is a gravity in his presence, a solemnity in his eyes, as though he carries something no one else can quite understand. And indeed, he does. For the truthful man carries the heaviest burden of all, the refusal to live in illusion. Most people find it easier to live with masks. We present faces to one another, polished, rehearsed, agreeable. A father plays the role of the strong provider, even when he trembles inside. A friend nods along to things he does not believe, only to avoid the awkward silence of disagreement. A lover says, "I will always be here," even while knowing deep down that nothing lasts forever. These masks are lies, of course, but they are lies we accept because they protect us from discomfort. They let us belong, they let us be liked, but the truthful man cannot wear them for long. He may try, for he is human after all, but something in him revolts. He feels the itch of dishonesty like a splinter in the mind. He senses the falseness of the role and cannot rest until it is removed. And so, one by one, he lays aside the masks. At first, this feels noble, liberating. He thinks, now I can finally be real. But he soon discovers that the world does not reward reality. The world punishes it. Imagine a dinner table where everyone is speaking politely about things they do not care about: politics, the weather, the price of bread. And into that circle steps the truthful man. He cannot force his tongue to move along with their games. He does not condemn them. He simply falls silent. But his silence exposes the emptiness of the conversation, and suddenly the others are uneasy. His presence becomes a mirror they would rather avoid. This is why the truthful man carries a burden, not because truth itself is a curse, but because it alienates him from the crowd. The world is built upon a delicate agreement. We will not disturb each other's illusions. And the truthful man, by his very nature, breaks that pact. He carries the heaviest burden because he cannot lie to himself. He cannot convince himself that wealth is happiness when he sees rich men weeping in their mansions. He cannot pretend that success is security when he knows that every victory ends in death. He cannot swallow the belief that belonging is found in imitation when his soul cries out that imitation is the death of individuality. Others can, others do. They dance to the music of the marketplace. They march to the rhythm of society's drum. They drown themselves in noise to avoid hearing the silence of truth. But the truthful man cannot. His ears are tuned to a deeper sound. And once you hear that sound, you cannot unhear it. Now, you may think, surely this man is free, for he sees what others cannot. And yes, there is freedom in truth. But freedom is not always light. Sometimes freedom is heavier than chains. Think of a prisoner released after many years. He steps into the open air, and for a moment he rejoices, but soon he trembles. For freedom requires choices, responsibility, risk. He cannot hide behind the walls any longer. He must stand on his own. So it is with truth. The liar hides behind illusion. The truthful man stands naked before reality. And reality is vast, uncertain, often merciless. This is why truth is not celebrated by the many. They prefer the comfortable shelter of lies. It is why prophets are stoned, why philosophers are ridiculed, why the honest man is mocked as naive or dangerous. His refusal to join the masquerade unsettles the dancers. And so, his freedom becomes his weight. The truthful man carries another burden too, the burden of clarity. To see things as they are means to also see the suffering that others ignore. When a man numbs himself with distractions, he can walk past the beggar in the street without a second thought. When he tells himself, "It's not my problem," he feels no sting of conscience. But the truthful man cannot turn away so easily. He sees the hunger in the beggar's eyes as if it were his own. He feels the trembling of the earth under the weight of human greed. He senses the loneliness hidden behind laughter, the despair tucked behind smiles, and all of it presses upon him. This is not to say he wallows in misery, no, but he is awake to pain. And awakening to pain means carrying it, even when it is not yours. It is like standing on a mountain where you see the whole valley. Beautiful, yes, but also terrible. You see not only the flowers, but also the graves, not only the rivers, but also the blood that stains them. To see clearly is both a gift and a wound. And so the truthful man appears heavier than others. He is not entertained by empty distractions, for he sees through them. He is not intoxicated by shallow praise, for he knows how quickly it fades. He is not comforted by hollow promises, for he knows they cannot be kept. Instead, he carries the silence of honesty, the loneliness of authenticity, the sorrow of seeing through illusions. Others dance lightly because they believe the dance is real. The truthful man walks heavily because he knows it is only a play. And when the play no longer convinces you, even laughter becomes heavy in your mouth. But here lies the paradox. The burden of truth, though heavy, is the only burden worth carrying. For what do the others carry? They carry the burden of lies, though they do not admit it. They must remember their falsehoods, repair their broken disguises, run from their own reflections. Their burden is confusion. The truthful man's burden is clarity. And though clarity weighs him down, it also steadies him. He may stumble under its heaviness, but he does not fall into the abyss of delusion. He may feel alone, but he is not lost. He may feel heavy, but he is real. And reality, though harsh, is the only ground upon which a man can truly stand. So the truthful man carries the heaviest burden, not because life is cruel, not because he is cursed, but because he refuses the cheap comfort of illusion. He would rather suffer under the weight of truth than rest lightly upon the pillow of lies. And perhaps this is the greatest paradox of all. Though he seems burdened, though he seems lonely, though he seems weary, the truthful man, in his heaviness, is more free than the light-footed dancers of illusion. For when the dance ends, when the music fades, when the masks fall away, it is only the truthful man who will still be standing, burdened but unbroken, heavy but whole. To live truthfully is to walk without armor, and that is why the truthful man appears fragile, even weak. While others surround themselves with shields of pretense, I am strong, I am in control, I am important, he steps forward bare, unwilling to clothe himself in what he knows to be false. At first glance, this seems foolish. How can a man without armor survive in a world that worships appearances? How can the unprotected endure in a society that mistakes masks for strength? Yet here is the paradox. His lack of armor is precisely his strength. For what happens when the storm comes? What happens when the illusions crack? The man who wears false armor is shattered along with it. The truthful man, having never depended on illusions, stands firm. The burden of truth is heavy because it does not allow shortcuts. The liar can flatter to be liked, boast to be admired, pretend to be wise. He can win friends with deceit, gain power with manipulation, and soothe his conscience with distraction. The truthful man has none of these luxuries. He must take the long road, the slow road, the honest road. He must earn respect, not demand it. He must accept solitude when his honesty unsettles others. He must face consequences when his refusal to lie exposes what others would prefer to hide. This is why his steps are heavy. Every footfall is weighed with reality. And yet, this heaviness is not defeat, it is integrity. The truthful man walks with burden, yes, but each burden carried honestly strengthens his soul. To carry truth is also to carry solitude. You see, lies create crowds. They give us slogans to chant together, masks to wear together, illusions to share. Whole societies are built upon mutually agreed pretenses. And within them, people feel united, not because they are truly connected, but because they are collectively deceived. But the truthful man cannot join this unity. He cannot nod along when his heart says no. He cannot pretend to belong when he knows the price of belonging is the death of his authenticity. And so, he walks apart. He becomes the man at the edge of the room, the one whose silence disturbs the noise, the one who no longer laughs at empty jokes. He feels the sting of being misunderstood, the ache of being excluded, the chill of being alone. This is his burden. But it is also his refinement. For solitude, when embraced truthfully, is not emptiness but fullness. The man who is left alone with his honesty begins to hear what the crowd cannot. He hears the song of the wind, the wisdom of silence, the quiet companionship of the stars. In losing the applause of the many, he gains the intimacy of the real. The truthful man carries the heaviest burden because he is called to suffer without escape. The liar suffers too, of course, but he hides his suffering beneath distractions. He runs into the arms of entertainment, drowns himself in noise, loses himself in ambition, He refuses to look at his pain directly, and so he carries it in secret, disguised even from himself. But the truthful man has no such escape. He feels pain and admits it. He faces fear and names it. He confronts despair without the drug of denial. And so his suffering is heavier but also cleaner. Like a fire that burns hot and pure, his suffering refines him. It teaches him what matters. It strips away what is unnecessary. It forges in him a strength that cannot be faked, for it is carved directly from the stone of reality. This is why the truthful man, though heavy, is free. The liar may laugh loudly, but inside he trembles. The crowd may cheer together, but each member fears solitude. The pretender may shine for a season, but he is always running from the shadow he casts. The truthful man, however, has nothing to fear. His life may be heavy, but it is steady. His road may be lonely, but it is real. His heart may ache, but it is whole. And this wholeness, this integrity, gives him a strength that no applause, no praise, no illusion can provide. The burden of truth also transforms the way he sees others. At first, honesty isolates him, but in time, he discovers that his burden is not only his own. Everyone, in their quiet moments, senses the weight of reality. Everyone knows, somewhere deep inside, that their masks are fragile, that their illusions will one day fail. The truthful man becomes a kind of silent witness to this hidden awareness in others. He no longer despises them for their lies. He understands. He sees that their dishonesty is not cruelty, but fear. They fear what he has already accepted, the raw, unpolished face of reality. And so his burden, though heavy, ripens into compassion. He does not join their illusions, but neither does he condemn them. He carries his truth with dignity, and in doing so, he becomes a light for those who are ready to step into honesty themselves. The heaviest burden becomes the deepest gift. For in the end, what the truthful man carries is not merely his own honesty, but the possibility of honesty for everyone. By refusing to bow to illusion, he shows that it can be done. By bearing the cost of authenticity, he proves that the cost is survivable. By walking alone, he clears a path that others may one day follow, and though he may never be thanked, though his road may never be crowded, he leaves behind a trail of footprints that point toward reality. So yes, the truthful man carries the heaviest burden, but it is a burden worth carrying, for while it bends his back, it straightens his spirit. While it isolates him from the crowd, it connects him to the cosmos. While it removes his illusions, it reveals the eternal presence behind them. And when all the masks fall away, when all the pretenses collapse, when all the illusions dissolve, it will not be the liar who stands free. It will be the man who carried the burden of truth all along.
You know, there's something rather curious about human relationships. We walk through life believing that the people closest to us, those we love, those we trust, have our best interests at heart. And perhaps they do. Or perhaps we've confused their needs with our well-being. Perhaps we've become so accustomed to saying yes that we've forgotten what it feels like to say no. And so we carry on, nodding along, extending ourselves, stretching ourselves thin, until one day we look in the mirror and wonder where we went. When did we become this person who lives entirely for others? Now I want you to consider something. If you were to sit quietly for just a moment, really quietly, and ask yourself, when was the last time I did something purely for myself? What answer would come? Would it be last week, last month, last year? Or would you discover, with a touch of sadness, that you can't quite remember, because somewhere along the way, you stopped mattering to yourself. You became a resource, a solution, a pair of hands to fix what others have broken, and nobody asked if you were tired. Nobody wondered if you needed rest. They simply assumed you'd always be there, ready to give, ready to help. ready to sacrifice. This is what we're going to talk about today, not the grand tragedies of life, but the small, quiet thefts. The ways people ask things of you that steal your peace, drain your energy, and leave you wondering why you feel so empty. Because you see, it's not always obvious. They don't come with a sign saying, "I'm about to take advantage of you." No, they come with tears, with guilt, with phrases like, "But you're my father," or "You're my sister," or "If you loved me, you would." And before you know it, you're carrying a weight that was never meant to be yours. So let me share with you 5 things that people will ask of you. 5 things that sound reasonable on the surface, but are anything but. And more importantly, why staying away from people who make these requests might be the wisest thing you ever do. The first thing people will ask is for you to carry their responsibilities as if they were your own. Have you noticed this pattern? Someone close to you, perhaps a son, a daughter, a sibling, comes to you with a problem. Not just any problem, but their problem. And they present it in such a way that suddenly it becomes your emergency. They say things like, "I don't know what to do," or "I'm really struggling," or "Can you help me?" And because you love them, because you want to be helpful, you step in. You offer advice, you offer money, you offer your time. And what begins as a single favor becomes a permanent arrangement. Before long, you're not just helping. You're doing it for them. You're making their phone calls. You're covering their bills. You're raising their children while they go off to live their lives. And when you dare to suggest that perhaps they should handle some of this themselves, you're not met with shock, with hurt feelings, with accusations of being selfish or uncaring. How dare you withdraw your support? Don't you know they need you? Let me ask you something. When did their inability to manage their own life become your life sentence? Because that's what it is, isn't it? You sacrifice your rest, your comfort, your dreams, all so they can continue avoiding what they should have faced long ago. Their own responsibilities. Think of it like this. Imagine you're walking along a path carrying your own backpack. It's heavy enough. It contains your worries, your plans, your needs. And then someone comes along and says, "Here, can you carry mine too? Just for a little while." So you take it, because you're kind. But then another person appears, and another, and before you know it, you're bent double under the weight of everyone else's baggage while they walk freely ahead, unencumbered, expecting you to keep up. This is not help. This is exploitation dressed up as love. And the cruelest part is that the more you give, the more they expect. They don't see your struggle because they're too busy enjoying their freedom. And when you finally collapse from exhaustion, they won't be there to pick you up. They'll be puzzled, perhaps even annoyed, that you can no longer serve them. You are not a support system for adults who refuse to support themselves. You are not a safety net for people who keep jumping off cliffs expecting you to catch them. At some point, and that point is now, you have to ask yourself why you're doing this. Is it really love? Or is it fear? Fear of being seen as selfish? Fear of being disliked? Fear of setting a boundary and watching them walk away. But here's what they don't tell you. The people who walk away when you set boundaries are the same people who were never truly there for you in the first place. They were there for what you could provide. And the moment you stop providing, the relationship ends, which tells you everything you need to know about its true nature. So let me be very clear. If someone is asking you to carry what they should be carrying themselves, if they're turning their problems into your problems, if they're making you responsible for their happiness, their finances, their choices, you have every right to say no. Not maybe, not we'll see, no. Because your life is not a rescue mission for people who won't save themselves. The second thing people will ask is to borrow money with no intention of returning it. Oh, this is a delicate one, isn't it? Because money and relationships, they mix like oil and water. Someone you care about approaches you, they're in trouble, they need money. Not a lot, they say, just enough to get by. Just to cover this bill or that emergency or this one-time situation, and they absolutely promise they'll pay you back. Next week, next month, as soon as things get better. So you lend it because you want to help, because you believe their promise, because you think, well, if I were in their position, I'd hope someone would help me. And at first it feels good. You've solved their problem. You've been the hero. You've proved your love. But then something interesting happens. Or rather, something doesn't happen. The money doesn't come back. And when you gently mention it, they look hurt. They remind you of their struggles. They suggest that you're being insensitive bringing it up. Or they promise again, soon, very soon. And you believe them, because you want to believe them. Months pass, maybe years. And that money you lent has vanished into a black hole. But worse than losing the money is what you've lost in the relationship. Because now there's tension. There's resentment. Every time you see them, you think about what they owe you. And they know you're thinking about it. And instead of addressing it honestly, they avoid you. Or they act as if nothing happened. Or they ask to borrow more. Let me tell you what's really happening here. When someone borrows money with no real plan to return it, they're not borrowing, they're taking. And they're counting on your discomfort with conflict to let them get away with it. They know that bringing up money feels vulgar, feels cheap, feels like you're putting dollars above relationship. So they use your own values against you. Your generosity, your kindness, your reluctance to make things awkward. But think about this. If they truly valued the relationship, would they put it at risk by taking your money? If they truly respected you, would they make promises they have no intention of keeping? Of course not. What they're really saying is that their temporary comfort matters more than your financial security, that their wants outweigh your needs, that you exist as a bank they can withdraw from without ever making a deposit. And here's the painful truth. Lending money rarely solves the real problem, because if someone is in financial trouble, a loan from you is just a patch. It might cover this month's crisis, but it won't fix the behavior that created the crisis in the first place. Next month, there will be another emergency, another need, another request. And if you've already lent once, they'll see you as an easy target, a reliable source, someone who can't say no. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what if it's a real emergency? What if they genuinely need help? And I would say this. There's a difference between helping someone in crisis and enabling someone's pattern. A real emergency is rare. It's the medical bill that comes out of nowhere, the car breaking down when they need it for work, the unexpected loss of income through no fault of their own. And even then, even in genuine emergencies, a person of integrity will do everything in their power to repay you. They'll set up a plan. They'll make regular payments, even small ones. But if someone is coming to you regularly, if their life seems to be one emergency after another, if they always need just a little more to get by, then you're not dealing with bad luck. You're dealing with bad choices, and your money won't fix that. It will only postpone the inevitable moment when they have to face their own patterns and change them. So what do? You protect yourself. You recognize that lending money to people who won't return it is not generosity. It's foolishness. And you have worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to watch your savings disappear into someone else's bottomless need. Your financial security is not a negotiable item. Your peace of mind is not for sale, and anyone who asks you to risk either is not thinking about your well-being. They're thinking only of themselves. If someone truly needs help, there are other ways to provide it. You can offer advice. You can help them create a budget. You can point them toward resources. But handing over money, especially significant amounts, especially without a clear agreement about repayment, is asking for trouble. And at this stage of your life, trouble is the last thing you need. The third thing people will ask is for you to choose sides in conflicts that have nothing to do with you. This one is particularly insidious because it comes wrapped in loyalty. Someone you love is fighting with someone else you love. Maybe it's your children arguing with each other. Maybe it's a sibling feud. Maybe it's extended family drama. And suddenly, you're pulled in. They come to you, each side, each person, presenting their case, explaining why they're right and the other is wrong. And then comes the question, the trap. Whose side are you on? What a terrible position to be in. Because the moment you choose, you lose. If you side with one, you alienate the other. If you try to stay neutral, both sides accuse you of not caring. And if you attempt to mediate, to bring peace, you often end up blamed by everyone when the peace doesn't hold. Let me tell you what's happening here. These people are not really asking for your wisdom or your help. They're asking you to validate their position. They want you to confirm that they're the victim, that they're justified, that the other person is entirely at fault. And by pulling you in, they're trying to build an army, trying to gather supporters, trying to win not through being right, but through having more people on their side. But think about this carefully. What do you gain by getting involved, even if you successfully mediate and bring temporary peace? What have you really accomplished? Because people who are truly ready to resolve their conflicts will resolve them with or without you. And people who aren't ready will simply fight again, probably over something just as trivial, and once again expect you to referee. Meanwhile, what do you lose? Your peace, your neutrality, your ability to love both parties without reservation. Because once you've taken a side, once you've said this one is right and that one is wrong, you've created a division that may never fully heal. Every future interaction will be colored by that choice. Every holiday gathering will carry tension. Every phone call will require careful navigation. And for what? To solve a problem that isn't yours, to referee a fight between grown adults who should be capable of handling their own disagreements. That's not wisdom. That's volunteering for unnecessary suffering. There's an old saying, when two people are fighting, the third person who gets involved gets hit by both. And it's true. Because no matter how carefully you try to be fair, no matter how much you try to see both sides, at some point, each person will feel you didn't support them enough. Each will remember not what you did for them, but what you didn't do. And your reward for trying to help will be resentment from all directions. So what's the answer? Simple. Don't get involved. When someone comes to you with their grievances, you listen. You acknowledge their feelings. But you do not take sides. You do not become their champion. You do not carry messages back and forth between warring parties like some kind of emotional postal service. You say, with kindness but firmness, this is between you and them. I love you both. I'm not taking sides. Work it out yourselves. Will they like this answer? Probably not. They may push back. They may try to guilt you. They may suggest that if you really loved them, you'd support them, but hold your ground. Because what you're really doing is respecting everyone involved. You're respecting their ability to solve their own problems. You're respecting the relationship by not poisoning it with resentment. And most importantly, you're respecting yourself by refusing to be used as a weapon in someone else's war. Your job at this stage of life is not to fix every broken relationship in your family. Your job is to maintain your own peace. To love people without becoming entangled in their drama. To be available without being involved. And that requires boundaries. The clear, firm, loving boundaries that say, I care about you, but I won't be pulled into this. The fourth thing people will ask is for you to change who you are to make them comfortable. Now we're getting to something really interesting, because this request comes in many forms. Sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's subtle, but the message is always the same. You are too much, or not enough, or wrong, or outdated, or embarrassing. And they, in their infinite wisdom, know how you should be instead. Maybe it's your clothing. They say you dress too old-fashioned, or too young, or too bright, or too plain. Maybe it's your opinions. They want you to stop talking about certain things, stop holding certain views, stop being so set in your ways. Maybe it's your hobbies. They think what you enjoy is silly, or boring, or beneath you. Or maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe they want you to change your entire lifestyle, move somewhere else, live differently, be different. And here's what makes this particularly painful. These requests usually come from people who claim to love you. They're not strangers criticizing you from a distance. They're family, close friends, people whose opinions you value. And they frame their demands as concern. They say they're worried about you. They say they just want what's best. They say if you'd only change this one thing, everything would be better. But let me ask you something. Better for whom? Because when someone asks you to change something fundamental about yourself, they're not thinking about your happiness. They're thinking about theirs. They're uncomfortable with who you are. They're embarrassed by you. Or they have some image in their mind of who you should be, and you're not matching it. And rather than accepting you as you are, they want to reshape you into something more convenient for them. Think about what they're really asking. They're asking you to pretend, to put on a mask, to hide the parts of yourself that make you unique. They're asking you to trade your authenticity for their approval. And that's not a fair trade. That's not even close to a fair trade. Because who are you without your quirks, without your preferences, without the things that light you up and make you who you are? Here's what's fascinating. The people who ask you to change are often the ones who haven't done much changing themselves. They haven't examined their own lives. They haven't questioned their own assumptions. They simply follow the crowd, do what's expected, and then demand that you do the same. And when you resist, when you insist on being yourself, they become offended. But you've lived long enough to know something they apparently haven't learned. That the opinions of others are just that. Opinions. Not facts, not laws, not requirements. Just thoughts in someone else's head about how they think you should live your life. And you are under no obligation to live according to someone else's thoughts. Now, I'm not saying you should never grow or change. Growth is beautiful. Learning is necessary. But there's a vast difference between changing because you to become better and changing because someone else can't accept who you are. One comes from within. The other comes from fear. One expands you, the other diminishes you. So when someone suggests you need to be different, pause. Ask yourself, is this about genuine growth, or is this about their discomfort? Is this suggestion actually helpful, or is it asking me to shrink so they can feel bigger? And if the answer is the latter, if what they're really saying is, be less yourself so I can be more comfortable, then the answer is no. Not maybe. Not I'll think about it. No, because here's the thing they don't understand. You've earned the right to be yourself. You've lived through enough years, enough experiences, enough trials to know who you are. You've paid your dues. You've learned your lessons. And if someone can't accept that, if your authenticity is too much for them to handle, that tells you everything you need to know about the relationship. It tells you they love an idea of you more than they love the actual you. And that's not real love. That's not real friendship. That's a transaction where you perform and they approve. And you're too old for performances. So wear what makes you happy. Listen to the music that speaks to your soul. Hold the opinions you've formed through decades of living. Be exactly who you are. And let those who can't accept it find somewhere else to direct their criticism. Because you didn't come this far to start hiding now. The fifth thing people will ask is for you to sacrifice your peace for their comfort. This is perhaps the most insidious request of all, because it doesn't usually come as a direct ask. Instead, it arrives as expectation, as assumption, as emotional manipulation dressed up as relationship. It looks like this. Someone in your life is unhappy. Maybe they're struggling with their choices. Maybe they're in a situation of their own making. Maybe they're just generally dissatisfied with life. And rather than dealing with their unhappiness themselves, they expect you to fix it, to absorb it, to make it your problem. They call at all hours, needing to talk. They show up unannounced, expecting comfort. They lean on you emotionally, financially, practically, until you're bent double under the weight. And if you try to create space, if you try to set limits, they respond with hurt. How can you be so cold? Don't you care? Don't you love me? What they're really saying is this: my emotional state is more important than yours. My needs matter more than your peace. You should sacrifice your serenity so I don't have to deal with my discomfort. And that's not a reasonable ask. That's emotional tyranny. Because let me be clear about something. You cannot carry someone else's emotional burdens without drowning in them. You cannot fix another person's unhappiness. You cannot love them enough, help them enough, sacrifice enough to make them whole. That work, that deep internal work of finding peace and contentment, that's their job, not yours. But many people, especially those who've spent their lives caring for others, fall into this trap. They think love means endless availability. They think caring means never saying no. They think if they just try hard enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, they can save the other person from their pain. But it doesn't work that way. Because what you're really teaching them is that they don't have to take responsibility for their own emotional life. You become their crutch, their emotional support animal. And the more you provide, the more they lean, until you're both falling down. So here's what needs to happen. You need to protect your peace like it's the most precious thing you own. Because it is. Peace of mind, calm, the ability to wake up without dread, to move through your day without constant anxiety. That's not a luxury. That's life itself. And anyone who asks you to give it up for their sake is asking too much. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you love people without losing yourself. You support them without drowning in their problems. You care without carrying what they should be carrying themselves. And when they push back, when they accuse you of being selfish or uncaring, you stand firm, because you know the truth. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. And anyone who truly loves you would want you to have peace, not give it away. So there you have it. 5 things people will ask of you that you must refuse. To carry their responsibilities, to lend money you'll never see again, to choose sides in their conflicts, to change who you are, to sacrifice your peace for their comfort. And if you're wondering how to actually do this, how to say no when you've spent a lifetime saying yes, here's your answer. You do it with love, but you do it firmly. You don't explain endlessly. You don't justify. You don't negotiate. You simply state your boundary, and then you hold it. Because here's what nobody tells you. The people who respect you will accept your boundaries. They might not like them. They might be disappointed. But they'll respect them. And the people who don't respect your boundaries, well, they've just shown you who they really are. And that's valuable information. You've lived long enough to know that life is short. That time is precious. That peace once lost is hard to regain. So protect it. Guard it. Refuse to give it away for any reason to any person, no matter how much they claim to need it. Your life belongs to you, not to their expectations, not to their demands, not to their comfort, to you. And the most radical thing you can do it yourselves is simply live it on your own terms.